Gotta have it. Okay. Yeah, they can't see you. You give me your mic, I can hook you up. You're behind me, so they can't see you, unfortunately. Yeah.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening, Ken.
Good. We made it in a nick of time, and we like to do that often. So we just made it. It's getting a little nervous. Thought I was gonna have to put a message out saying, "Hey, if we're not there, it's because we're late." Well, we made it. We're on time. Everything worked out. And welcome, everyone. This is episode 212 of Line Upon Line. Tonight, we're going to talk about the pure faith of Hannah and David, the great faith they had. And we have David with us, and we have Dr. Ricks, of course. And if he coming to us from a remote location, somewhere south of his usual location.
One of those Murphy's Law things. You know how life goes. It goes, well, anyway, we won't talk about Murphy's Law. Let's laugh at something more laughable.
We'll take it.
This one's called the Groom's Day. This guy is speeding down the highway. A policeman pulls him over. And he says, "Where do you think you're going so fast?" And the man in the car says, "Well, let me explain, officer. Be quiet. I don't want to hear any excuses." So he takes him to the jail. He says, "I want you to sit here until my chief gets here. But, sir, I wanted to explain." "I don't want to hear anything. Be quiet," says the policeman, "till the chief gets here." I looked at his schedule. You're very lucky. He's going to his daughter's wedding, so he'll be in a good mood when he gets back. The guy says, "No, he won't. I'm the groom." Yeah, I'm the groom. Okay. The next one is similar. A car is speeding down the highway, and suddenly behind him he sees the flashing lights of a state trooper. He goes faster. He's trying to lose the state trooper. He's going faster. He's going even faster trying to lose the state trooper. But the guy has got one of those fast Dodge Chargers, and he just keeps closing the gap. You know, this is scary and dangerous. So he slows down, pulls over. The cop comes out and says, "What do you think you're doing? When you see these lights, you're supposed to pull over. Why didn't you pull over? Why didn't you pull over?" The man said, "Let me explain. About 5 days ago, my wife left me for a state trooper. And when I saw your lights, I thought you were bringing her back."
I'm surprised he caught him.
"You're returning her to me." Now, here's something for the women. Washing instructions. A man who is housework challenged, husband, says, I'll do the laundry. I want to wash my sweatshirts. So he goes to the laundry room and asks his wife, "Well, which of these settings should I set?" And his wife says, "Well, what does it say on the shirt?" "Texas A&M." All the Aggie fans are offended. Okay. I should have said Ohio State. Okay.
Hey, wait a minute.
Okay, here's an Old West pun. Very short one. Got to think about this for a minute. A three-legged dog hops into the saloon in the Old West, jumps up on the bar stool, sidles up to the bartender and says, "I'm looking for the man who shot my paw." P-A-W, paw.
Oh, man.
My final one. A friend is trying to get this young lady to come back to church. She hasn't attended in a long time. She just shook her head and said, "I haven't been there for so long. I think it's too late for me. I've broken all 7 commandments." Okay, now it's time to get serious. Okay, a good laugh. Okay, today's topic is delays in receiving answers from God, and the blessings that can make one stronger and greater. So sometimes if God delays giving us an answer, it can make it. See, I want to look at why the pure faith of Hannah and David was so strong. Two great Bible examples. I want to look at both of them, Hannah and David both, and see why their faith was so strong. Well, first thing to remember, when God delays an answer, and he's, at least in some respects, testing our faith, the proper way to handle it would be to stay positive and keep, as they say, keep believing that God's going to give the answer. Stay positive, and it will make you stronger. In the case of Hannah, she was childless for a long, long time. It actually says God closed her womb. Here's one of the patterns that you see in the Bible. Women who are going to be do great things, or their children are going to do great things, have to wait for those children for a long time. In many cases, they're miraculous births. I mean, the women were too old to do it naturally. It was a miraculous birth. And you can look at examples like most of the patriarchs like Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph's mother. All were, at least it appears, similar things. And Sarah. And when they had to wait so long for their sons, they poured more into those young men, so that waiting made them spiritually stronger, and things worked out. And you'll see that with pretty much all the patriarchs. Let's put up our first slide, Ken, please.
All right, 1 Samuel. But to Hannah he gave one double portion, for he loved Hannah, but the Lord had shut up her womb. And her foe also provoked her grievously, in order to make her tremble, because the Lord had shut up her womb. Luke 1, verse 7. And they had no child, because Elizabeth was barren, and both were advanced in their days. But the angel said to him, Do not fear, Zacharias, for your prayer is heard, and your wife Elizabeth shall bear you a son, and you shall call his name John. And you shall have joy and gladness, and many shall rejoice at his birth. For he shall be great in the sight of the Lord, and shall neither drink wine nor strong drink, and he shall be filled with the Holy Spirit, even from his mother's womb.
If you look at John the Baptist, Christ said no greater prophet existed than John the Baptist. So that says a great deal about him. I think maybe one principle is that as you become more mature and God makes you wait, but you don't give up and lose faith and drop out, older parents just seem to be better parents.
Anybody that makes sense. Yeah, it makes sense. It's like grandparents when they get, I'm sure when grandparents, they've already been through it once, and they've had a few years to work it out. And then although they do like to use Mountain Dew and and candy and then send them home, I think that's the little payback, from their children giving them grief, but yeah, I can understand that.
I think grandparents are better parents. I spent most of my life with my grandparents, so I gotta say, anyway, they were a lot more mature than my parents. I mean, I guess that goes without saying. This is an interesting story. I'll tell it. It just fits what we're saying. I was going for this job. My first summer out of college. I went for this job, and you fill out paperwork and stuff. And the guy said, "Is so-and-so your grandfather?" And I said, "Yes." He said, wow, if he's your grandfather, you got the job, no questions asked. I guess I realized my grandfather was well thought of, but I was surprised how well, and it was a pretty big area. I was surprised he even knew my grandfather. I'm just giving that example of, I do think older people, you know, he's known as a humble, hardworking guy, really. Anyway, going to all that. The point I'm getting at is those mothers that had to wait became greater mothers, and their faith got stronger because they had to wait. Let's go on to the second slide.
First Samuel 2:18. He raises up the poor out of the dust. He lifts up the needy from the dunghill to set them among princes. Yea, he causes them to inherit a throne of honor. For to the Lord they are pillars of the earth, and he sets the habitable world on them. He keeps the feet of his saints, and the wicked are silenced in darkness, for by strength shall no man prevail.
And I just want to add to the story, I probably should have mentioned this first, is that her son Samuel, of course, that's what the book is called, Samuel. Her son Samuel was one of the greatest high priests and prophets, you know, in biblical history. You know, one of the best. And Hannah wrote a part of the Bible. 1 Samuel 2, verses 1 to 10 were written by her. We just read a little section of, but you can read the entire poem that she wrote, thanking God for the child and saying that basically God is going to lift up the meek of the earth. And well, anyway, this mother wrote part of the Bible, and I think she did a great job in raising her son. And
yep.
By the way, I know that they downplay fatherhood and motherhood and parents in today's world, but parents are very important. And I was listening to it's a program called AFR Urban, and the man was talking about urban problems, and he says the lack of fathers, especially, but good parents, is really undermining the poor side of town. Maybe it's undermining everything, but especially the poor side of town. Okay, let's put up the next slide.
All right. All right. And Samuel served before the Lord a child girded with a linen ephod, and his mother made him a little coat and brought it to him from year to year when she came up with her husband to offer the yearly sacrifice.
By the way, she was so thankful for the child. She, after he was weaned and whatever else, is probably potty trained as well, she brought him to the high priest and, you know, thanked him for his prayer for the child and dedicated him to the service of God. And as a boy, God saw his pure heart and his pure faith and chose him to replace Eli's bad priestly sons and to become the new priest. And I think you could argue that some of her pure faith and her stronger faith was learned by her son Samuel as well.
Yeah. If keeping faith for a short period of time is not a test, you know, the longer you have to keep your faith is the better the test, and probably the stronger you'll be when that faith pays off, when it's answered.
Mm-hmm.
I think another thing to look. Go ahead, Ken.
I was just going to say, it's like running a marathon. You know, it's versus running a sprint. Running a marathon, you really have to condition yourself to be able to keep with it, keep the pace up, and keep everything. And you really got to know your body very well to be able to handle something like that. Sprinting is, to an extent, yeah, but it's over quick, and you don't have to suffer and endure a great was it 24 miles or whatever, you don't have to suffer and endure but for a few seconds in most part, maybe a couple of minutes.
I think the other part of this, back to Hannah again, was you learn. I think children learn more of what they see than what they're told, because your actions speak louder than words. So if she must have been a praying mother and set the right example,
Yep. And the fact that God allowed her to write part of the Bible is a very positive thing.
It is.
And of course, her son was the one that laid hands on David. There's a lot of powerful connections in the whole thing. I want to say one thing about parenting that I think is worth mentioning. I think it's a double-edged sword. In this context, I mean that the parent, of course, has to do their part. I mean, obviously, if you could mess up a kid in the first 6, 7, 8 years of life if you're totally crazy, but assuming that doesn't happen, the parent has to do their part. But the child at a certain age, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, also is a free moral agent and can make a decision, which means you could be a pretty good parent. No one's going to be perfect, but reasonably good. And your child could choose to go to the criminal side or other bad things. And you can be a pretty bad news parent, but don't destroy the kid, but a bad news parent. And the kid, 14, 15, 16, decides they're going to be different, better than their parents, or at least, go for high moral standards. And we've, some psychologists who deal with troubled kids have said they've seen that. So we shouldn't beat ourselves up too much over what our kids do.
Yeah, I know a couple people, 3 of them off the top of my head, who had really bad parents, but they're good people. One became a doctor. Another owns a small business. The other guy is a SWAT team member. And their stories, 2 of them, their stories are just heart-wrenching, what they went through as children. Yet they said, I'm not going to be that person. I'm going to be my own person. I'm going to accomplish things. And they set out and did it. So you're absolutely right.
Yeah, and that's the tricky thing. You just don't know. People do have free moral agency. The second example is David. Now, David got a greater write-up in the Bible than anybody else. So there's so many things about David we could talk about. But I want to focus for this discussion on just one incident. But first, before we get to the incidents with King Saul, David had to wait a long time for his throne. One commentary said 15 to 20 years. I think the shortest I've heard is at least 14 to 15 years. And at least the first number of those years are called the wilderness years, when he was out in the wilderness. God, of course, anointed him probably at 16 or 17 or 18 to be king, but he had to wait all those years to get it. And maybe as much as 20 to get the full throne of all 12 tribes. I believe in retrospect, I bet you if David were here, David would probably say those wilderness years were good for him. It strengthened his faith, strengthened his toughness, made him a better leader and a tougher soldier. And the men that were the 500 or 600, 700 that eventually became David's mighty men that you read about in the Bible. So that delay in getting the throne, it's like God was training David.
Yep, absolutely. You could see it.
Well, it gave him time to meditate, to pray. Plus sharpened his physical skills and which built his confidence as a young man. I think If I were sitting out by myself all night with just animals, I would be I'd be talking to God a lot. You know? I had a rock and a string, you know.
Speaking of training, even when he was there playing the music to calm Saul down, and he was Saul's armor bearer for a year or two, even that training was probably good for him. I'm sure he was smart. He was observing things, seeing how castles were run and how royalty was run. And I just feel that if he had gotten it too easily, he would not have become the greatest king in Israel's history. Actually, he's the only king, I'm certain this is true, who conquered the Middle East all the way up from, you know, the Euphrates up where Iraq is, all the way to Egypt and everything in between, and created a great empire for his son Solomon to inherit, with wealth and peace and prosperity. David achieved that. I think those wilderness years were good for David. However, let's go to the incidents that we want to talk about, to talk about David's faith and pure faith and character.
All right. And he came to the folds of the flock on the way, where there was a cave, and Saul went into cover his feet. And David and his men remained on the sides of the cave. And the men of David said to him, Behold, this is the day of which the Lord said to you, Behold, I will deliver your enemy into your hand, so that you may do to him as it shall seem good to you. And David arose and cut off the skirt of Saul's robe secretly.
When you read that, remember the context is that Saul was relentlessly pursuing David because, well, the moment he heard that song, David became, of course, famous. He was like his version of a military hero, rock star, all in one, because he was apparently charismatic young man. The girls were singing at parades. They would sing, you know, Saul has killed thousands. David has killed 10,000. And you can imagine Saul looking over at David. And at that point, the Holy Spirit had been taken away from Saul. So that incident really got Saul thinking about, well, the incident got Saul enraged and jealous at David. So he had been pursuing David, he and his 3,000 troops, and he went into a cave to relieve himself and took a short nap. First of all, let's admit the obvious. That could not have been a coincidence. Of all these giant caves in the mountains that David and his men are hiding in the back of, Saul goes in one all by himself. What are the odds of that happening by pure luck?
Very tiny.
And it's clear either God allowed the devil to arrange it, or most likely God arranged it as a test for David. And obviously, as a test, it was going to be a test, right, Dave?
Yeah, and David was very impetuous, so it could have gone any direction at times. If you think about how he did things, he was very impetuous. I think as he finally got much older, he got that under control. But it was like Peter. Peter was very impetuous. He would jump up and just, you know, and David seemed to, as a younger man, seemed to be that way as well. And it strikes me, that God likes manly men. You know, he wants us to be who he made us. And David was a man after his own heart. And, you know, and he, you know, said how much he loved Peter as well. So I find that an interesting kind of coincidence with the two gentlemen. But David being impetuous is why he went after Goliath, and being impetuous going into the cave. David, he could have just done him in. So I'm sure God sat there and took a look at this and said, "What is he going to do?" You know.
Well, you wonder, how did he know? How did he know that this wasn't the time for him?
Right.
Well, you know, I really believe that when David first saw Saul relax after relieving himself and probably laying on something for his head and resting, and David started creeping up on him quietly with his sword out, he probably intended to dispatch Saul quickly. But as he got close and thought about it, he realized, that he shouldn't assassinate the king. But that is quite a test that David went through. That he had to. By the way, here's something to think about, just among things. If David had been the bitter type, the angry, bitter type that builds up and feeds, he regurgitates anger and evil and gets bitter and bitter and more bitter all the time, there's no way he could have restrained himself. But I really believe David, in his own way, loved Saul. He was, of course, shocked by Saul's going crazy like he did at times. I don't think David was bitter. He was more of the positive type. Don't you get don't you get the feeling that David was a real positive type personality?
Well, I do. And I think the men that are real impetuous like that are like that because they see opportunity everywhere. And so they act without thinking. Take a look again at Peter, jumped off the boat, ran across the water a couple of steps and said, oops. David seemed to act that way. And he also seemed, back to the story of him and Goliath, when Goliath was out there, David got upset and said, I can take this guy. And I don't know if it was the Holy Spirit guiding him because he had such a relationship with God that God moved him that way, I'm sure. But again, nobody else would run out there and do it. He was 13 feet tall or something, I get nervous about a 6'5" guy.
Yeah, it's these guys that are muscled up on steroids. Never mind. I was thinking about what you said about Peter. The one thing that people forget about Peter, all the other 10 disciples ran off when the mob grabbed Christ. Peter tried to slice one of them's head open. He got his ear, but he was going for the guy's probably the middle of his head with his sword. And then Christ told him to put up his sword. The rest of them ran and hid. Peter followed along. Peter was brave. Now, there was a limit to his bravery. And I was thinking about David. David told Saul that a mountain lion grabbed one of the lambs, and David just dived, I'm sure, at the mountain lion without thinking about it that much. You realize how strong animals are? Even if these were small mountain lions, smaller than some of the ones we have in America, even still, can you imagine doing that?
Yeah, I wouldn't want to grab a bobcat.
Well, I think it either goes back to the fact that he, when you're young, you think you're invincible, or the fact that he had great faith that he could pull, faith in God, and that he could, he would help him do this. And it also, you talked about how it would train him for, future leadership. Great faith will also you have to have patience. Because if you don't have great patience to go along with faith, you may get disheartened fairly easy when you don't get your results quick. So that teaches you patience, and you need patience to be a good leader. So that's it goes along with faith is patience.
That's a good point you make, Ken. Let's look at the next slide. It makes me think about the next slide.
All right. John 16:33. I have spoken these things to you so that you might have peace in me. In the world you shall have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world.
And that's how we should take our pressures and troubles, until God rescues us. As much as is possible, be of good cheer. And like you were saying, Ken, if you can stay at good cheer for a long time period, it builds patience.
It does. And I'll be the first to admit I'm not always. I can't be that way all the time, but I know people that you could drop an anvil on their head and they would just smile and shake your hand. They are amazing people, and they show me anyway how it really should be, how we should treat each other, and how we should be in the sight of tribulation. They're always happy, and they're never bitter, and they just are a rock for people. And I admire that, and they have to have great faith in order to be that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had this conversation yesterday. I told you a friend of mine got killed a couple of weeks ago in a car accident. I've never heard anyone say anything negative about him, and I never heard him say anything negative in 30 whatever years I've known him. I was talking to my friend, and he said, there's another guy that's a friend of ours, and we've known him, I guess, 30 years or so, too. Nicest guy. Never anything negative, and never heard anything negative about him. And there are some people out there that are just genuinely happy within themselves. And I think as Christians, we should be striving to be that way.
Yep, and they're that way no matter what happens to them. That is the amazing part. No matter what their pains or ailments or troubles, they always have a right attitude. And I'm not that strong, so I will get down if things get rough.
Yeah, that staying positive is a great thing. And I think the one thing David realized was that Saul was God's anointed. And God put him in that position, and it was up to God to remove him. Also, I think God would not want someone in a high position who would usurp authority by stabbing someone in the back. I mean, even if David killed him in a fair fight, surely David could do Saul in, and being the mighty warrior that he was. It still would be similar. So I don't think that God wants that kind of usurping of power, like all these revolutionaries. The second in command does in El Capitano, and then he becomes El Capitan, and then the revolution, another bloodbath, another couple of years, his lieutenant does him in. God doesn't want that kind of thing. And by the way, David got tested on this twice. It was a different situation, and his assistant really emphasized it. He said, "You don't have to do it, David. Let me do it. With one spear, I'll nail him to the ground so quick he won't even hear a sound." And I'm sure he could have done it that way. David passed both tests, and he restrained his own men who wanted to obviously do in the king and get the power faster.
I've been wondering why that hasn't happened in North Korea. The way they do things. I'm shocked at this. He just seems so dumb. Maybe he's not. Maybe he's not.
Well, I was watching some videos about Joseph Stalin. He was so paranoid his whole life, and he had a weird life, and he learned some weird stuff when he was studying for the priesthood in a seminary, which apparently a lot of spying and backstabbing, believe it or not. But anyway, he was paranoid his whole life. And he had his secret police every so often just eliminate anybody who became too important. That's how paranoid he was. Now, following that communist example, his father and grandfather may have done the same thing. And I remember this story that Khrushchev told. Khrushchev said the only way he survived as a top aide to Stalin was he played an idiot at parties. He'd get drunk or roam for he played down his intelligence. So that Stalin wouldn't get jealous of him. That's how he survived. And I'll bet you that North Korean guy is paranoid. He has a secret police watching all the generals. I'll bet it's a nightmare of stabbing and spying and.
I imagine, I bet people don't sleep well over there.
And it's like you get too powerful and too famous, and one of those kinds of dictators, unless you're a family member. Although this guy has killed at least one uncle and one brother, right? At least in the family. So he's not averse to killing family members. He may have killed another uncle too. I'm not sure.
He killed one with an anti-aircraft gun. Obliterated him. He just turned him into a pink mist.
His name is Kim Jong-un. I think I may have said there Kim Jong-un, but Kim Jong-un. But you could imagine that's just the kind of thing that God doesn't want in his kingdom. But that's the kind of thing you often have, palace coups and infighting, and it's just one big mess. One of the factors that we see in the Bible is that vengeance belongs to God, not up to us. I mean, obviously the government has a role in prosecuting criminals, but vengeance belongs to God, and we, on a personal level, should be very forgiving, even to the point of, even though you don't have to let them take advantage of you, but as much as possible, loving your enemies, or not hating them at least. And that's, that's quite something, a Christian high standard. Let's go to our next slide.
All right. 1 Samuel 24:6. And he said to his men, far be it from me by the Lord, if I will do this thing to my Lord, the Lord's anointed, to stretch forth my hand against him, since he is the anointed of the Lord. And David held back his men with words and did not allow them to rise against Saul. And Saul rose up out of the cave and went on his way. I bet that wasn't an easy thing for him to do either.
No, imagine he wondered, boy, how popular am I going to be with my own men after this comes down? But it was the right thing to do. He didn't let his bitterness build up.
Well, not only that, if he does that, it sets, like you said earlier, it sets a precedent. And someone else might want to take over, Well, you did it, might as well.
And let's go to the next slide. It just kind of adds just a little touch to this matter of not letting anger and bitterness build up.
Okay, Ephesians 4:26. Be angry and do not sin. Do not let the sun go down upon your wrath, neither give place to the devil.
And it is clear that, before you go to bed, you should forgive the person, let it go, whatever is possible, because the devil loves an angry, vengeful, hateful person. You're like tuning into his wavelength when you do that. Tune me in. So we don't want to do that. Some people use the excuse the ends justify the means. In other words, they could argue we're going to create such a wonderful government under David that if we have to, take a few shortcuts to get there, it's worth it. That kind of ends justify the means is how they justified killing, as it turned out, in the 20th century, 100 million people in the communist empire. It's unbelievable. And even some Western liberal writers, because they like the idea of socialism and no God and government running everything, to try to excuse Stalin's purges and all of his gulags, they said, well, you can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs. And I think someone said that about the French Revolution too. I'd have to look up who said it. Might have been Rousseau, but somebody said that the French Revolution too. Well, they had a bloodbath, as you all know.
Yeah.
But David didn't. God doesn't like that kind of reasoning, and David didn't do that kind of reasoning. But the interesting thing is, David went out of the cave, showed the royal skirting of Saul's robe, held it up high, and now Saul's got 3,000 picked soldiers with him, and David was brave enough to come out of the cave and say, "Look, I could have killed you."
Well, he effectively de-pantsed him in front of everybody.
Pretty much humiliated him.
I'm sure his men looked at him differently when he walked out there. Just
showing a little too much thigh this year, are you, Saul?
But you know, when he said that, Saul cried and realized he was wrong. David was so nice, he gave Saul room to turn around and repent and kind of have a reconciliation without putting all the blame on Saul. He said, well, look, maybe you just have bad advisors that are making you think it. Now, David probably knew that, that he may have had bad advisors who encouraged it, but David knew that Saul was the problem too. But he was nice enough to go for reconciliation. And let's go to the next slide.
All right, 1 Samuel 24:9. And David said to Saul, Why do you hear man's words, saying, Behold, David seeks to do you evil? Behold, your eyes have seen today how the Lord had delivered you today into my hand in the cave. And one said to kill you, but I had pity on you. And I said, I will not put forth my hand against my Lord, for he is the Lord's anointed. And my father, behold, yes, see the skirt of your robe in my hand, for in that I cut off the skirt of your robe. I did not kill you. Know and see that there is neither evil nor transgression in my hand, and I have not sinned against you, yet you hunt my soul to take it.
It is kind of amazing, isn't it? And Saul did cry and realize he was wrong. And someone asked, well, why didn't David and his men just go with Saul and the rest of the army? They went their separate ways. I think David was smart enough to realize Saul may feel sorry now and he's not going to try to kill me now. He's going to go back home. But in his emotional state, how long will it last? And how long did it last? Maybe a week or two or three?
Not very.
You know, a side note is anxiety, anger, all of these things raise your blood pressure, your cholesterol, all these, they're very unhealthy things. And my doctor was telling me, that said he'd check your blood, your cholesterol, and it's at, 200, which is too high. But he comes in and tells you you're going to have immediate surgery, and then checks it. He says literally it'll go to 2,000. Very quickly, because your liver the anxiety starts forcing you to create this cholesterol. So harboring this, trying to go against the will of God, which David realized that killing Saul would have done that. Saul was appointed by God to be the king, and harboring anger and anxiety or anything else about Saul was not healthy for David, and apparently he knew that as well.
It's almost as if, well, it is true. Anything God says do is good for us, not our enemy. Because you think, well, God is saying, don't hate your enemy, despair your enemy. No, it's for our good.
Well, it says when you pray for your enemies, it's like leaping hot coals on their head, and so, think about it. That's really what you want to do to the guy. Go do it the right way and get on your knees.
Yeah.
I've had experiences before I was in the church, obviously, and then after, and I've had similar situations I handled two different ways. The one before the church and the one since I was in the church, and understood more, learned more, and was really trying to focus on being more humble and not so controversial. And the one that happened since I was in the church ended so far well. Everything worked out well. I just kept persisting and not being drawn into it, and it paid off. And big time, the person finally understood and could see what they were doing. I believe that it was not productive. It wasn't helpful, and they finally I think I wore them out, and things changed. But if, before I was in the church, if that would have happened, it wouldn't have took long. That would have ended very abruptly, and it just would have been not. It would not have been the outlook that I wanted. Regardless of how you have to humble yourself and try to be patient and long suffering against a situation or a person, it always ends better when you go that route. Almost always. It almost always ends better.
Be full of grace and nice, right? And
Yep.
by the way,
the people around him finally say, "Hey, you're beating on this person for nothing." I mean, they're just taking it, and then pretty soon that person starts to look pretty bad, even to their close friends. So,
like Saul probably looked to the army. None of the army people probably said anything. You know, they started thinking, this guy's in charge, and he's you know what I mean. He's slipping
right.
so often.
They could see the wrath, and they could see that he was being unreasonable and wrathful and not using his head, and he's in charge of them, and that makes you fear going into battle with someone that is your leader. I'm sure. And if they're unreasonable and they fly off the handle, yeah, you're going to have problems with that as someone following them.
And by the way, shortly thereafter, they went into battle, and the army was negative. Saul was negative. The army, well, I won't say they deserted him. Maybe the battle is a little more complicated, but it went very badly, and Saul died. And to prove my point that David loved Saul and Jonathan, someone came to David with Saul's crown and said, "Look, I killed Saul, and I know you're going to reward me, David, because he was your enemy." And David did not take it well. He did not like that idea.
No, not at all. Not for that guy. I think he would have better kept his mouth shut and just kept on rolling.
I mean, he assumed David would react the way most carnal leaders would react. Oh, my competition has fallen. I'm going to celebrate in the street and dance up, because he's dead. Actually the opposite. David wrote a poem, which was, I guess, made famous by Shakespeare. The famous line is, "Oh, how the mighty have fallen." They use that in a sitcom, Our Miss Brooks. I don't know why I remember that more than Shakespeare's line. But anyway, just keep it in mind. Let's go to the next slide. At least look at one or two of the lines that David wrote about Saul and Jonathan.
All right, 2 Samuel 1:19. The beauty of Israel is slain upon your high places. How are the mighty fallen? Tell it on Gath. Do not let it be known in the streets of Ascalon, lest the daughters of the Philistines rejoice, lest the daughters of the uncircumcised triumph.
And we know David loved Jonathan greatly, and that comes out in the poem too. But I think he loved Saul in a way because Saul was his father-in-law, and he probably regretted that Saul became mentally unstable at times. But I think God likes it when you don't rejoice when your enemy falls.
David probably had a kinship with Saul as well, where he loved him. And remember, he was his armor bearer, and he spent a lot of time with him. And he probably realized that he was slipping mentally, and had more had pity on him than anything else.
Yeah, and that's the attitude to take, is to more of a loving attitude. And I thought we maybe would quote this one final scripture about how Paul recommends you treat your enemies when you can.
Romans 12:20. Therefore, if your enemy hungers, feed him. If he thirsts, give him drink. For so in doing you shall heap coals of fire on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good.
That idea of overcoming evil with good, obviously it's hard to do, but that's the goal. To not get down and dirty with them, and each side pulls the other one down dirtier and dirtier and dirtier, but overcome evil with good.
Yeah, pretty soon if you don't, you have, what is that, angry traffic, what do they call that, road rage or something?
Yeah, road rage has gotten some people in big trouble, I happen to know for a fact.
I see it more and more all the time.
And I heard this it's somewhere, some big city, which I won't name because it's in the state I live in. I'm told there are all kinds of bad things happening to people over just little offenses, little things that offend them, but they can't walk away from the offense without doing something and make it worse.
Yeah, people can't let things go anymore.
There's a story, and I'll make it as quick as I can. The guy got up and his toast weren't cooked right, so he was upset. And on the way to work, he yelled at somebody, and then they went to their job and they yelled at somebody at their job, and it went on and on and on. And 15 people later, the lady goes home at the end of the day. She got in all kinds of trouble at work, and she kicks the cat. And the moral of the story is if the first guy would have just gone to her house and kicked the cat and left everybody else alone, society would have been better.
Could have cut out the middleman. Everybody in between would have had a good day.
Go over to Janet's house and kick her cat.
Either way, the cat loses.
Well, it's a cat.
It's only a cat, right? Well, I think the point of Hannah and David is that if you have to wait for an answer from prayer, stay positive, keep your faith, and your faith will get stronger and purer, and it'll be good for you spiritually. It'll be very good for you spiritually. If you can hold on and stay positive during the wait. And also, if God makes you wait for some things, it may be a blessing in the long run, but you just don't see it until the time. And, you know, Hannah, no doubt, was a greater mother. And, of course, she dedicated her child to God because she had to wait.
Yep.
I don't believe the scriptures give ages, so I don't want to say her age because I don't know. But the implication is long beyond the normal childbearing years, she did not have a child. I know in the case of Sarah, I believe she was 80 when she had a child. I can just imagine, and I think in the case of Elizabeth, she was around 80 or 90 when they had their child. I can just imagine what a mature parent they were.
Yeah, and to think of the people around them, well, they would have had, they would have had to know something miraculous happened.
Yeah, they'd have to know that that child is special, and the parents are special. So I think that's just a wonderful example in the Bible, and well, motherhood's a big deal. I guess everybody knows that, but it's still worth mentioning again. It's a big deal. And the fathers were important too. Like Zacharias, who was one of the top priests in John the Baptist's case. Certainly the fathers were important too. Just some things to pray about. Lois Chapman, one of the last of the, I like this title, Great Ladies of the Church. I realize that's a relative statement, but anyway, that's how I feel. Is going into a hospice. And that means they only believe she has only a few weeks to live. So pray for her and that everything goes very smoothly. And anybody else we should mention?
Well, you could mention Loma. She's doing well. She's doing well. Hoping she can make the holy days, but she's doing better.
Good. And pray for Carolyn Birch. And let me think. Well, the only one I know about for sure, and we have some more minor injury people, but I won't mention them for the
Mary
moment.
Burkett's having some issues.
Beg your pardon?
Mary Burkett.
Okay.
It's having some issues. Sandy talks with her, I think, daily, just about, and some health issues and other things. So.
She lives in Florida, right?
Yes, she's only maybe 2.5 hours from us. So
Okay.
if she needs something, we can jump in the car and head straight up there. But maybe not at these gas prices. I don't know.
What is it in Florida?
$2.59.
Yeah, that's
today.
what we've got up here. That's what we've
Yeah,
got.
well,
up
you're
here.
unfortunate, folks. We were at 240 something, but for us, that's high. Although, considering what happened in Houston, you know,
Right.
how long do you think this increased gas price will last? There's no shortage of gas. It's just the pipeline and the refineries are out of business for a while.
Well, they're just trying to secure the supply. That's all they're doing. They're trying to make sure that they slow consumption down enough so that they can keep up with supply. It's not. I mean, people get mad when this stuff happens, but if they don't do these sort of things, then you do have gas shortages. If you don't do these sort of things, you can run into gas shortages.
And watching Irma.
No, the other hurricane.
Yeah,
the other one.
That could be a Cat 5. Yeah, it could be a Cat 5.
Where's it going in at? I forget.
Do they know yet?
They don't know yet. But if it goes under the Greater Antilles and goes into the Gulf, it's going to be a monster because of the hot water, the warm water. If it comes in from the other side, they're still saying it's going to be a Cat 5, which is a monster.
Wow.
So this could theoretically hit Panama City Beach, right? I'm not saying it will, but it possibly could, right?
In theory, it could. If it goes under Florida, hits that Gulf, it could go straight into Panama City Beach.
Or into Mexico.
Or into Mexico or Texas.
Or Texas. Oh, no. That'd be the worst thing if Texas got back-to-back. You know, it's like having back-to-back cancer. Well, maybe anything is possible.
Well, they need to be kicked when they're down.
By the way, I know the global warming people are saying, this proves we were right. One is, I don't know if mankind could change the fortune of the weather, even if we did a few of the things they want us to do. I don't believe we could change it. But one thing I do remember, about 12 years ago or somewhere around in there, Al Gore and some others says, there are going to be a ton of hurricanes. They're going to smash into the mainland. We're going to be really swamped. And for about 9 to 10 years, there were some hurricanes in the ocean. Some of them got close enough to drop some rain, but not that much. We didn't have a hurricane make landfall for like 9 to 10 years. Just because they said it. The point I want to make is it's like people have tried to predict earthquakes. And they're studying them, and I'm not saying they don't have information on them, but they don't know enough to know for sure. Does that make sense?
No, you know what? There was a volcano a couple weeks ago. They say that volcano wiped out all the global warming prevention efforts that we've done for the last several years. So all gone. 5 years, 10 years, whatever it was. So that one volcano, one natural disaster volcano wiped all the stuff that we've done, all the solar panels, all the E85, all the trash that we've done went back to zero with one volcano, and it wasn't even a big one.
It put more dust in the atmosphere, you mean? High up.
More CO2, yep. It offset everything that all of mankind tried to do, which shows you that mankind not only can't hurt the environment, also can't fix it.
Exactly.
You know, we do not have the power. And there's, they talk about CO2. There's more argon in our atmosphere than there is CO2. And there's been times when there's been probably 1,000 times more CO2 in our atmosphere, and everything was just fine. This was way back, it was a tropical world back then. I bet before the flood we had a whole lot more CO2 than we have now.
And by the way, CO2 is good for plants. Anything that's good for plants cannot be considered a poison gas like the EPA says. That's ridiculous. All I can say is, my point is that the earth is so robust and powerful that mankind does not control it. They can't predict when the earthquakes will come. They can't predict when the hurricanes are going to come on shore. They study them, and I'm not taking away from all the books they write about climatology and earthquakes, but they still don't know enough to know.
No, I just bought a book. I just started reading it. What was the inconvenient? Oh, what is it? It's a rebuttal to Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth. And I just started reading it. It's some scientist who has a whole lot of credentials wrote it. It's not a very long book. It's only like $4 or $5 on Amazon. It's an ebook. He self-published it, and I just started reading it. So I don't know what the name of it is. If I think of it real quick, I'll shoot it. I'll mention.
The fact that he can't get it published ought to tell you something, doesn't it? There's certain truths that they're spiking. There's a lot of truths they don't want you to know, and I guess people won't find out about them. Like the Nazis were not conservatives, because it's National Socialist Party in Germany. They were socialist. Hitler did not believe in Second Amendment. He confiscated weapons. He did not believe in individual rights. It was a total dictatorship. He did not believe in small government. It was big government, big police state. In so many ways, it's the opposite of conservatism, individualism, pure capitalism. And most people, they run around talking, oh, we got Nazis running America. They don't even have half an idea what the Nazis were really like. The Nazis were political criminals. They used blackmail, thugs on the street to beat up their opponents. Now, they do understand that, but they did so many bad things that, oh well. And they insisted on and got, they destroyed one newspaper 4 or 5 times that published things against them. And eventually when Hitler got to power, most of the newspaper editors went to the concentration camps. 1 or 2 escaped to Switzerland to tell the story. In other words, they did not believe in free press.
And the name of that book is An Inconvenient Deception: How Al Gore Distorts Climate Science and Energy Policy. The man's name is Roy Spencer. It's only a 84-page book, so I think it costs $3 or $4 to buy it, and that's what I paid for it. And it gives you a lot of information about how they're trying to deceive the public.
Inconvenient Deception. Roy, what's his last name?
Roy Spencer. Roy Spencer.
Okay.
Yep.
We'll probably get the book and read it just because I liked it. Because they're going to be blasting us with, it's all our fault. These hurricanes wouldn't be coming if we didn't drive these cars we're driving. And if we just lived in a little cabin with hardly any electricity, depending on which ones you talk to, don't eat meat, and a whole bunch of other, don't have children, there are too many of us, and other crazy things.
That
I don't think they can control the weather.
What was that, 1900 or 1904 or something? That hurricane that went through, was it Galveston, same place? Killed how many thousand people? This time we're what, 20, 30 tops?
I think it's
that's terrible.
39 killed, which is bad, but
okay,
not like the one in Galveston a century ago.
Right, could have been 4,000.
Yeah.
Because we didn't have the technology and the ability to rescue people that we do today. We just didn't have it.
I know they had a tornado, I forgot the year, but I think it was like in the 1920s, that was a mile wide, went from Oklahoma to southern Illinois. You're thinking a mile wide, just total destruction across the middle of America. We've never had a tornado that big, and there weren't that many cars back then.
Right.
I know we had a lot less industrial, whatever it is, in the atmosphere then. Now, I just know everybody's going to be overwhelmed because now they can say, see, we were right.
Yeah, well, we've had bigger disasters with more loss of life long before there was the internal combustion engine. And could you imagine, I was thinking of this today, could you imagine if Texas was all green, no coal, and no natural gas, and all their power came from windmills and solar panels and whatever else is out there? There would be no power in Texas right now. It'd be done. But because they use gas or natural gas and coal and other things to fire their electrical plants, they can still function and allow these people to find shelters and to get help. If they were all green, there'd be no power. None.
I thought something interesting. It was like the second or third day of the hurricane, and they said many parts of southern Texas still had electricity. I thought that, including Houston, I thought that was interesting, because you would have thought every electric line would have been ripped apart by the wind, and I'm sure some were, but apparently a lot of electric lines survived or underground.
Yeah, if they were all solar, there'd be panels in Utah right now. You know, there wouldn't be a solar panel mounted anywhere near Texas.
Yeah. And by the way, we heard this stat about people going out to eat like 4 times a week in Houston. Is that right, honey?
4.1.
For the average person went out to eat in Houston 4 times a week. That is a symbol of prosperity.
Yep.
In other words, in general, I mean, sure they have poor pockets like everybody else, but in general, Houston is a very prosperous area, very industrialized and very prosperous.
By contrast, in Venezuela, the socialist mecca of they don't eat at a home, they don't eat anywhere because of socialism. They'd love to go be able to eat in their house. They can't even do that.
Yeah, they're going into dumpsters and riots in grocery stores and anyway, communism, socialism to that extreme.
Far worse than that.
Work. Yeah. And by the way, the only people with guns in Venezuela are the ones that are supporting the socialist dictatorship. They took everybody else's guns, and you see how well that's working out for the poor people.
It's funny how that works, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll just tell people, don't be overwhelmed by all the talk of global warming. I really don't believe mankind can control the weather. We don't even yet completely even understand it.
Nope, not at all. They didn't even know where that hurricane was going to go. The remnants. One time it was going to cross over Texas and Mexico and go back out. One time it was going to double back. They don't know where it's going. Now it's going back up through the U.S. coming your way, I think.
Yeah, I think some rain today, but we just missed out. We need the rain. We just missed out on it. Just south of and east of us, they got 1 to 3 inches of rain. Was it today, honey?
I don't know.
I think it was today. It was cloudy over the from the hurricane, but we didn't get any. We could have used an inch or two.
Yeah, we're going to get it tonight, tomorrow, I think.
You're going to get the rain tonight?
Yeah.
Well,
when they can tell me what the weather's when they can tell me what the weather's going to be tomorrow accurately,
I think they've given us, is it either Saturday or Sunday, a 40 or 50% chance of rain. Now you realize that when a weatherman tells you there's a 50% chance of rain, he cannot be wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like if I go into a football game and I say, there's a 50% chance your team is going to win. I can't be wrong.
Or boxing match, somebody's going to come in first and somebody's going to come in second, guaranteed.
Well, I've enjoyed our discussion today. Because I had to move location, I don't have what our topic is for next week, but we'll get it to Ken pretty soon, so you'll know.
Sounds good. And I'll get it up there as soon as I get it. But I just want to thank everyone. Thank you, David and Dr. Ricks, as usual. We hope to see you all again back here next Sabbath. And I want to mention a couple of things. The podcast, you can still, you just don't forget, you can subscribe to the audio version on Google Play, on Pocket Cast, and on iTunes. You can, and the booklets that are up on iBooks. There's been about almost 1,000 booklets downloaded now, and more will be added soon. And then you can also subscribe to the Garner Ted Armstrong sermons that are up on the website. You can go to iTunes for that, and Google Play and Pocket Cast, and you can type in Garner Ted Armstrong. You can subscribe to the to the podcast, and you just download anything that's on there and listen to it when you're driving or walking or what have you. So just want to let you know it's all out there. Go ahead.
Also, they can see some of the sermons on YouTube, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Also, is it possible, because I've done this with other things, not myself, but they could download the audio, put it on a jump drive or something, and listen to it in their car? Is that possible?
Yeah. All you have to do is with the phones nowadays, you just have a podcast app, either the one that comes with like an iPhone. It's built into an iPhone. It just said podcast, a little purple icon. And then if you go to Play Music also has podcasts. You would just type in the search engine, Line Upon Line or Garner Ted Armstrong. Ours will come up, and you just click on subscribe and download what you want and just go with. You don't need to put it on a thumb drive. It just downloads right to your phone. So you can listen to it anywhere.
So you plug your phone into the car and listen to it in the car.
Yep, you sure can.
Those long, dull drives, you don't want to listen to boring headbanging rock music.
If you don't want to hear death metal in your car as you drive to work, you could get something else on there. Yes,
something that'll really put you to sleep. No.
Yes, there you go. All right. Again, thanks everyone, and we'll see you back here next Sabbath. And everyone have a good, safe Sabbath, and we'll see you again.
Oh, Ken.
We're happy you could make it. So glad you are here, and hope that we've been able to make God's word more clear. Until next time, may God be with you in everything you try. But for now, till next week, we have to say goodbye.